I'm Paul Cowling with Film Independent, and welcome to another virtual member session. Tonight, it's all about our artist development program, and we've got three of my colleagues here to tell you everything about applying to some of our programs. And with us today are three of my colleagues. As I said, I'll introduce them as I see them here. So top left, Ashley Flores from Fiction Program. She's the Fiction Programs Associate. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining us. And then bottom right here, Alana Waxman. She's the coordinator for non-fiction programs and fiscal sponsorship. Hey, Alana.
Hi, everyone.
I love your fancy library there.
Thank you.
This is the, yeah, I have no books on the shelf here, but this room is real that I'm in. So. And then moderating today, he's the manager of non-fiction programs and fiscal sponsorship. Daniel Cardone is here. Hey, Daniel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. And you implying in the real room? Is that what you're saying?
You are actually in a real room in the office, right behind this wall here, I think, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to go for about 25 minutes. They're going to talk about the programs. I'm going to step off stage. And then around the 6 o'clock mark here at local time in LA, Apurva Charan is going to join us. She's the producer of Joyland, which won the Spirit Awards for Best International Film this year. She was a Project Involve Fellow in 2019, and the film itself was in the producing lab. She was in the producing lab 2020 and on Fast Track 2020 with Joyland. So she'll be joining us shortly. We're leaving the Q&A open for you to submit questions. So please use that for questions. We won't look at the chat for Q&A. The chat is left open for you to sort of exchange your emails with each other for everyone in the audience, and you can drop in your socials there, Instagram, stuff like that, if you want to do that in the chat. But don't put questions there because our panel won't be reading the chat for questions. But any links that we share will be in the chat too. And make sure you have it set to save the chat at the end of the evening. But for now, I'm going to step off stage and hand over to my three colleagues. So, Daniel, you want to take it away?
Well, thank you, Paul. And again, thanks everyone for coming. So as Paul said, we're going to be giving you a bit of an overview on artist development and then focusing in on three programs in particular, which are going to be the Producing Lab, Fast Track, and Fiscal Sponsorship. So artist development is a unit within the larger framework of Film Independent. And as the name literally implies, we develop artists. We run a number of different programs which are focused on helping artists develop their projects and their skill sets and providing networking opportunities to get you out into the industry and hopefully on the way to a successful career. So some of the programs we run are the Documentary Lab, the Screenwriting Lab, Producing Lab, the Episodic Lab, the Episodic Directing Intensive, Fast Track, and Fiscal Sponsorship. There's a few more, and there's also some fellowships and awards. So if you want to read more about those, check out our website, and Alana's going to be dropping the link to that in the chat. So when we're done here tonight, you can read a bit more about that. So yeah, and as Paul said, we're going to be joined by producer Apurva Charan later on, who's producer of the fantastic film Joyland, which is finally getting a domestic release. It's breaking box office records in New York right now, and hopefully will be here in LA for you all to see soon. And as he said, please use the Q&A function to ask your questions, and we'll make sure we get through as many as possible before we get to the end of tonight. But first up, Producing Lab. So Ashley, that's your domain. So tell us a little bit about the Producing Lab. How long is the Producing Lab and what does it entail?
All right, well, let me dive right in. So the Producing Lab is a 2-week intensive in the fall for independent producers. We select 6 projects that are either in development or in the post-production stage, and that would benefit from what we provide in the lab. I can go over the sort of general structure that's helpful of it.
Yeah, that would be great if you could sort of talk a little bit more. So what kind of skills does it help a producer coming to this develop?
So I'll give the structure. The first part is the session. So we have sessions and workshops, and we cover everything from legal to financial to production. And then we have a feedback session. So there's feedback sessions after we paired fellows with an experienced creative advisor, provides the feedback and helps them develop their project a little further. And then they also receive peer feedback. The last part of the entire 2 weeks is a pitch session. So throughout the 2 weeks, the fellows are practicing a pitch that leads up to this last pitch session, where we bring in industry experts to provide some feedback.
And
so they develop the pitching skills. I hope that, I was clear on that.
Yeah. So, all right. So did you mention how many people you accept into the lab?
We select 6 projects.
And ideally, I mean, apart from projects that are, like you said, in development or post, is there a particular flavor to the projects or the kinds of people that generally are accepted or into the lab?
We're looking for projects that have a unique perspective, unique point of view, coming from an authentic place. I know, at least for me, I'm really looking for regional or geographic diversity, projects that are outside of the Hollywood bubble. What does it look like to see projects that are further out in the United States, further out in the world? But that's pretty much it, just projects that have a unique point of view that we haven't seen.
And what about, like, in terms of a career trajectory, what kind of person would be ideal for this kind of lab?
We're looking for producers that want to be creative producers professionally.
So that would be their primary role in the industry.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Cool. All right. As I said, at any point, people can add questions into the Q&A section. We will be coming back to the lab later on to ask more questions about the producing lab. But so let's move on to then. Oh, sorry. The one thing I missed out. Is it only fiction projects or is it documentary as well?
It's only fiction projects.
And when can people submit?
Applications are currently open. The deadline is May 5th for the general, and extended member deadline is May 19th.
And we just had a question. How long was it again?
It is 2 weeks, and we ask that everybody attend. It's 10 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday, for 2 weeks. That is the commitment.
Great. So, sorry, I was just looking at more questions there. Well, let's dive into some of these as they come up again. So when you say creative producers, what specifically do you mean by that?
So producers who are attached to a project as a producer. They could be a producer director. Typically, we're looking for projects where the fellow is primarily the producer.
Right.
Maybe writer producer.
The term creative producer, though, would infer that it's not just a nuts and bolts money kind of organization.
Correct.
Thing. They actually have an input into the creative direction of the project. So I think that's, it's creative producers who aren't simply there as a money management kind of thing. We want people who are really kind of working with the story, working with the director to get the best out of the project. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, producers who are working from beginning to end, especially the development phase. So not just not a line producer.
Right. Someone specifically asked, do the producers of lab not be the writer director? Does that matter?
Or no, accept they can apply if they are attached as writer director as well.
And one last question before we move on to the next one. Mind you, everyone, we will go back and look at questions if anyone has more. Is it a first-time producer, or could you have a few under your belt?
We do accept first-time producers as well as seasoned
producers. And someone just asked, is it features or can it be a pilot? And the answer is no. We have the episodic lab for pilot episodes. So Producers Lab is features only. And based on a true story, absolutely counts as long as you have the life rights to the person you're making the film about. All right, well, let's move on now to the next program we're going to talk about tonight, which is going to be Fast Track. Ashley, once again, can you give us a rundown on Fast Track?
I could. So Fast Track is a little bit different. It follows right behind the producing lab, and that's typically November. It's a 4-day intensive finance market We select 10 fiction projects and 5 nonfiction projects. And we are selecting producer-director teams, and we pair them up with established financiers, production companies, agents, managers, and other film industry professionals.
And so how long does that program run for?
That is 4 days.
4
The
days.
first day is
Um,
the
okay.
first day is a practice pitching session, followed by the
But by the actual lab itself. Yeah.
Yes.
So how many meetings do people take on a typical day then in Fast Track?
10 days. I mean, sorry, 10 meetings per
10
day.
meetings per day.
It's very intense.
And the difference between Fast Track is Fast Track does accept nonfiction projects. Alana, how many nonfiction projects do they select for Fast Track?
We usually accept 5 nonfiction projects for the lab. Is that right, Daniel?
Yes, it is.
Okay, just checking.
It's hard being a moderator and also knowing exactly what goes into the program. But yeah, so we select 5 doc or nonfiction feature films to go into the lab. And unlike, say, the fiction component, we have 1 full day of meetings for the documentary films. So they have about 20 meetings within the space of a day. And so all of these meetings are going to be with film executives, distributors, and so forth, who potentially can be of assistance to the project, whether they bring to it funding or distribution, or even if it's just a potential networking opportunity. And I think that's the thing to remember about Fast Track, is while everyone's coming in there with a project, meeting with all these executives, hoping to be able to find the person who's going to make their film finished, it is also a great opportunity for networking and just to establish a connection that could pay off down the track. You know, you never know where your career is going to end up. So it's a fantastic opportunity for that, that as well.
And just to add, for documentary projects, we're looking for films usually that are in post-production, because we find that that is when this program would be of the best use for you, that and that also that you don't have all your financing in place, since that's what you're trying to achieve by taking part in Fast Track.
In terms of the fiction projects, Ashley, when they come to you, what state are they usually in?
They can be, well, they're in development. They're usually ready to go. So I think that's the biggest difference between the producing lab and the Fast Track finance market. The hope is that by the time they've come to Fast Track, they have everything that they need, and they just need that last piece, financing. Whereas in the producing lab, they might need, they're still looking for casting or a director. So as far as they can take the project for the producing lab.
So we had someone say, when you select producer director teams, you mean you only select a producer and director who are already together? Yes. When you come to Fast Track, you're expected to come with a team. We don't pair anyone up because we already see you want to be already working together to achieve this goal. Yeah. And so also, how many did we say a number for fiction projects? How many do you select, Ashley?
We select 10 fiction projects.
So there's 10 fiction and 5 doc projects. And when is Fast Track going to be open for submissions?
So the application will be opening later this month. The general deadline will be June 26th and extended deadline July 10th.
And it's going to be held on what dates?
In November.
Right. And since lovely COVID, most of our labs have been virtual, but are we gonna go back to in person this year?
I think we're still in talks on that.
Right.
Not sure.
Okay, good to know. So Wendy asks, can it be one person who is the director/producer for Fast Track?
We're looking for teams.
I will say, though, that for doc, we are open to it just being one person. And do we provide scholarships and stipends for creative producers who live outside of the US?
That I'm not too sure on.
Yeah, we don't actually at this time specifically provide scholarships or stipends, but we do run several awards programs, such as the Sloan fellowship. Do you want to tell us briefly about the Sloan, Ashley?
I sure do. So we actually have two grant opportunities. We offer a $30,000 Sloan Producing Lab grant awarded to one participant who submits a script and it's selected for the lab. It has to have a scientific, mathematical, or technology theme running throughout, or it could be about a leading character that's a scientist, engineer, or mathematician. We're also offering the Kate and Goldrick Family Foundation Grant, and that is a $10,000 grant for a Jewish filmmaker who's accepted into the lab. The Sloan grant for Fast Track is the same. It's $20,000 that we offer for one project.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we do, like Sloan is generally something we have every year, but say the Clayton Goodrich Foundation, this is the first year we're running that, and we do have fellowships that are new each year, or some that only last a year and change the next year. So please check at the website for info about what we have coming up that may or may not be relevant for you. Dan asks, how many applications do we usually get for the Producers Lab and Fast Track? A lot.
A lot. It ranges.
Was it 500 for Fast Track, or is that too much? That was it. I just recall the number was very high.
I think that sounds about right for Fast Track. For producing, I think it was half of that.
Right. So yeah, it's very competitive for all the labs. So not being selected is no indication of quality often, because there are lots of great projects, and sadly, as you know, only limited positions to fill. All right, so let's again, please drop any questions in the chat. Let's go to fiscal sponsorship. Alana, do you want to give us an overview of fiscal sponsorship?
I would love to. Fiscal sponsorship is kind of its own section of artist development, because what makes it a little different is that we're open for submissions year round, which I think is our only program in which you can apply anytime you are in need of fiscal sponsorship. So those of you who don't know, fiscal sponsorship is a fundraising tool or a financing tool. Some filmmakers, if they choose to do crowdfunding, or you're going to be approaching different people to donate funds to raise money for your film, sometimes it can be helpful to be fiscally sponsored, which means basically we take you under the wing of our nonprofit organization, Film Independent, and by sponsoring you, your film becomes a tax deductible entity. So when someone donates to your film, then they have a tax deductible donation. And sometimes that's useful to people, to donors, that it might incentivize them to give more money to your film because it's a tax write-off for them.
And this can also apply to non-cash donations as well. So like people donating equipment, donating catering. So anything that has a monetary value that's fixed, they can usually claim as a tax deduction as well. So it's a great, like we've had a lot of projects who've come in who haven't necessarily raised any money, but they've used that leverage of fiscal sponsorship to get basically free stuff donated. You can't donate wages or like a room in someone's house, but like, you know, you can do hotel accommodations and things like that. So it's a great way to sort of get as much as you can for as little as possible, especially because a lot of productions that are coming to us obviously don't have a lot of funding behind them. And so we get a lot of first-time filmmakers, we get a lot of short films and documentaries and special interest projects. So they really are projects that benefit a lot from fiscal sponsorship. But we do get bigger projects as well. Producer Molly Asher, who's an Oscar winner, a lot of her projects come through us, her smaller projects, where she's raising a large chunk of funding through equity investment, but then there's usually a smaller amount, usually under $100,000, that she'll raise through you know, charitable means, which could either be donations or grants or so forth. We had a question sitting here from Charles, who would say, does it conflict raising funds through crowdfunding like Kickstarter, which says that Kickstarter can't be used by nonprofits to raise for their organizations? No, there's no problem there. There's no conflict there because the Kickstarter funds are raised for your project. You're not raising those for Film Independent. We are only acting as a channel through which your funds come so that your donors can get the tax deduction. Also, you can run you can have a fiscal sponsorship account, and you can also run a Kickstarter campaign separately, and they have nothing to do with each other, and that's okay too. It's just that it's whatever model you prefer, basically. Oh, more questions coming in.
We're gonna have a lot of questions about fiscal sponsorship.
So Alana, you can see these. So you want to take
yeah, and I realize there's one actually in our regular chat. So just a reminder to put your questions in the Q&A box. But I see this one here from Marvin. So yes, I think I forgot to mention that sometimes people might sign up for a fiscal sponsorship program because they're applying for a grant or they've received a grant in which it's a requirement of the grant itself that you are fiscally sponsored. So yes, you can apply, and that's one of the uses of fiscal sponsorship, to apply for a grant so that we can kind of be the go-between for you to be able to receive that grant. And you can apply, you don't have to be in the US to apply for fiscal sponsorship. You can be outside of the US. There's some more details that we don't have to get into in this moment, but generally the answer is that yes, you can apply even if you are not based in the US for fiscal sponsorship.
Yep. Virginia asks, if I have outside local donors, can my donations be placed in fiscal sponsorship? So yes, if you are raising funds basically you can't raise funds and then deposit the funds into your fiscal sponsorship account. Your donors have to deposit it directly into the fiscal sponsorship account. So you can't be the mid person, but you can solicit donations from them and say, hey, here's my fiscal sponsorship account, and they can place it directly in there. So that it has to come from the donor so that we can receipt the donor, and so the donor gets the benefit. It can't come via you into your own project. Someone else asked, does being fiscally sponsored preclude someone from participating in any of the other programs? No, at all. It can actually be helpful because then we already know you and we know your project. So it immediately means we don't have to establish, learning about you, who you are, and so forth. And usually, often we have it the other way around, though, that people who've been through one of our other programs end up in our fiscal sponsorship program as well. And it takes varying lengths for us to process donations depending on how they come in. Credit card donations can sometimes take up to 10 days because of processing times. The fastest way is wire transfer or ACH, which takes 24 hours. And check is just 5 days, depending on when we actually receive the physical check in our hands. And yes, anyone can sign up. You just have to be a member of Film Independent to apply, and so it is one of our membership benefits. So you do need to be a current member to apply for fiscal sponsorship. And Alana, do you want to just post the link to our fiscal sponsorship page?
Yes, I will. And you'll see some of on this page, it's a very helpful page that also lists some of the benefits you receive when you're a part of our program. Do you want to quickly, I know we're about to move into a different section, but Daniel, should we also, I think we skipped a couple of the things in our little breakdown. Just making sure we hit all of those things.
Yeah, so we accept projects at any stage. And there is no deadline, which Alana already said. We accept funds via credit card, which we build a donation portal for you on our website, along with the project page. So we accept credit cards through that. We also accept wire transfers, direct deposit, stocks and shares, and checks. The only thing we don't really accept is a bag of cash yet. And let's see, what else did I miss, Alana?
Let's see. Also, how funds are paid out. Basically, you can, if you request a disbursement by 5 p.m. on Monday, the funds will be dispersed to you by that Friday. That's generally how the cycle works.
Yeah.
So
it's a little bit more in depth, but we do encourage anyone to email us at fiscal sponsorship at filmindependent.org with more specific questions. And that link is, of course, on the website as well. Before Apurva is going to be here very shortly, but Ashley, do you want to answer this one question about Fast Track?
Yes, I was just typing a response to it. So we do accept Fast Track projects that do not have cast quite yet attached. We just ask that you take the project as far as you can before your application, and now you're ready for the next step. We do invite industry experts, including casting directors. So if that's helpful.
Oh, sorry, you take that one, Alana.
Sure. This other question about setting up an LLC prior to applying. You don't need to have that ready before you apply. You can feel free to just apply. But once you're accepted, it's often useful to be running your funds through an LLC. So we would recommend that you would do that once accepted, though it's not required.
Okay, so there's a couple more questions there about the producing lab.
Yes, you do need to the anonymous attendee. The question is, do you need a completed feature script? Yes, you do. Or can the producing team submit treatment and synopsis? So that's actually a great question. I can briefly go over what you need for the application if that's helpful.
Yes, that would be great.
We ask that you have your logline, synopsis, a cover letter, your artistic statement, and a current status of the project. Any attachments you might have, including the cast, director, and of course you as the producer, budget, any financing plan. And if you don't have all of those things, that's also fine. More than anything, we're looking to see who are you as a producer as a whole, and what the project is. But you do need a feature completed.
Do we accept animated films for producing lab or Fast Track?
We do not at this time.
Okay. And yeah, so with the term team, it's really just producing, directing team. So that's the main. So if you've got other people attached, great, but it's not necessarily, it's really producer and director that we're focusing on in Fast Track. And I think there was a bit of confusion there about cast attached projects. That's fine though, isn't it, Ashley? It doesn't matter if you've got cast attached. It's
for Fast Track.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you could have cast attached.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you are still eligible.
Is it best to apply and get into the labs or fellowships prior to applying to grants? It doesn't make a difference at our end because we don't really offer any grants. The awards and fellowships are offered to people who are already part of our program. So in that case, yes, you would be, you would have to be in one of our labs to receive one of those fellowships. Yeah. Otherwise, if it's outside of us, it doesn't make a difference. It does not have to be a shooting script because it'll get revised. For Fast Track, again, we don't need a shooting script necessarily, but it should be something that is ready. And yes, the producer can also be the director. Just sort of clearing those questions out. So Alana, just while we wait for Apurva to turn up, what do we need for a fiscal sponsorship application?
Let me pull that up. Well, we like to learn a lot about your project. So you'll see that we'll ask for your script if you have one, a sort of artist statement, your timeline, and the most important part, I would say, for fiscal sponsorship, one of the most important parts is your fundraising strategy or your financial strategy. So you'll see a kind of breakdown. We give you a template, even a suggested template of how to break down how you're planning to raise funds for your film, whether through grants, through investors, through donors, and through anything that you already have secured. So it really helps us to get a sense of how that you're thinking it through. And of course, that it's going to change as you go down the road, but just that we see that you're thinking what your thinking is, and that it seems fairly reasonable for achieving what you say your goal is for your budget. So I think that that's often a reason why we may not accept a project to fiscal sponsorship if it doesn't seem that the filmmaker has thought through how they're going to be putting together their funds, and they don't specify exactly how and why you're applying for fiscal sponsorship. How is fiscal sponsorship going to be a part of your strategy? And so that we get a sense of how you plan to utilize the program. Because of course, it's a way to be under Film Independent's wing, but it has a very specific function. So we need to see that your film is going to take advantage of the program and what it has to offer, because we're putting our time and resources into your project as well. So I'd say if you are interested in applying for fiscal sponsorship, in addition to all the things that many of our applications ask for, of just getting a sense of your project itself, that particularly is an important part of your application.
Great. And now I'd like to welcome our special guest who's coming to us from outer space, it seems. Apurva Sharan, hi, nice to see you again.
Hi, Daniel. Sorry to keep everyone waiting for a couple
No, that's fine. We had lots to go through. So yeah, we're really happy to be here. Sorry, we're happy to be here, and we're happy you're here.
I'm happy to be here too.
Awesome. Well, so you've done everything that we're talking about tonight. You've done the producing lab, you've done fast track, and you're also part of fiscal sponsorship. So
and project involved.
And project involved. So tell us a little bit about when you first joined the Film Independent family then.
So I first joined the Film Independent family in 2019. Project Involved was the first program that I did. And I had just moved from New York City to Los Angeles. And I had left a lot. So I came from a film school background, but I'd left behind a lot of the film community that I'd built in New York City. And I was starting over kind of as an assistant in the LA kind of studio production company system. And Project Involved was a really, really wonderful way for me to meet other filmmakers, to meet other writers, directors, producers, DPs, colorists, and to also get a handle on producing a short film in LA. That my Project Involved short, Lonely Blue Night, was the first thing that I produced on the West Coast. So that was my first kind of entry into the Film Independent family.
And I just want to say to everyone, Project Involve, which is a 6-month-long program we do, that's going to be a subject of the next talk like this that Paul mentioned up at the front. So I think that he said that's going to be in June. So check the website and come back in June, and we'll have a complete rundown of what Project Involve encompasses as well. So once you did Project Involve, and then you came back with Joyland, the producing lab, which was called Gulab, I think at that time.
Gulab at the time, yes.
So, all right, let's break it down for people. Why did you want to join the producing lab, and what did you really hope that would give you?
So what I had, as we were applying to the producing lab, was I had a really strong director. We had 2 short films that he directed that had gone to festivals and had won awards. I had a lot of short films that I'd done, but we didn't have, we didn't know how to, we knew kind of like theoretically how to make a feature film, but I don't know if we had the right kind of like mentorship to make our first feature. And so what I really wanted was, very often scripts are in that phase where you think you have a strong script and you like it, but it is always kind of dependent on a lot of other people, whether it's financiers or, agents, managers, whoever it is. And there's just kind of like that, like one hurdle to figuring out why it's not getting made. And so that's the phase we were at, where we're like, we have a story we believe in, but there's just something about it that where the story needs to shift a little bit so that we can kind of figure out how we make this film. So the first thing that I would say the Film Independent Producing Lab was incredibly helpful for was to have a cohort of producers and storytellers, and also the mentors like Rebecca Green, yourself, Valerie, all of whom gave incredibly valuable notes that I was then able to take to, and then when you hear similar notes from the same people over and over again, you're like, oh, this is something that definitely needs to be addressed in the story if so many people are reacting in this way. So I took all of those notes back to the writer director, and they played a huge part in getting us to the draft that we sent out to financiers. The other thing that it helped with was to talk through our budget, to talk about if it was too high or too low, where we could cut, where we needed more money, and then to also talk about the recoupment structure, the waterfall that we were, and honestly, like the template that I was given in the producing lab is what I actually used for Joyland, and is like the actual template of recoupment that I gave to all of our investors. And then to talk with like lawyers and other producers and to hear how they structured their financing. Yeah, so I would say like that is what the producing lab gave me, like really concrete, hard skills.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked a question earlier to define a creative producer. I would say you fit into that category. So how would you define yourself?
Definitely a creative producer. I think, you're working hand in hand with the writer director to really shape the story. You're working with the director to make key hires, like the production designer, the DP, like, the production designers almost present to us as to like, this is what the visuals, look like based on the deck that the director is giving them and based on kind of how we're talking about the film. But really, like, everyone's kind of vision for the film needs to align. If I thought I was making, Joyland that's like set in the world of like a separation, and Syme thought he was making something totally like bodies, we would not have a cohesive film, and we wouldn't be able to give our HODs the right kind of instruction. So I would say it is really being on the same page about the kind of film that you're making, and then thinking about every step of the film, whether it's production or whether it's your festival release plan or whether it is your distribution plan in kind of a creative way, and as to like what is the best version of this to help launch an artist's career.
Cool. Ashley, did you have any questions about the producing lab for Apoorva before I go on to the fast track of it all?
I had a couple of questions. How far did you take the project before you decided now is the time to apply? Like, when was the moment you said, okay, time for the producing lab? This is how far I've taken.
Yeah, the thing about, I would say, the producing labs is that it's honestly hard to know. I would say you at the very least need to have a script that's been in development for a year or two. It's arbitrary but honest, because sometimes maybe it's an early draft, but it's so well structured, or it's so well written, or the director and you are at that stage where you're ready to make your first feature. So it's kind of hard to say, but I would say I think you need to have a script that you feel like you can stand behind and talk about creatively. And I would also say that you absolutely need to have a writer director attached who has shown consistently a certain level of craftsmanship. And that is what is going to put you at this, like at the strongest, that's going to help you have the strongest application. That said, I would also say that like sometimes you don't get into labs until you often apply a couple of times. And to show that you are a committed career producer or a career filmmaker, it does sometimes help to apply multiple times but then be very honest in your application and say, hey, this is how I have evolved as a producer, and this is how the project has evolved. And these are the things that we've changed in the script because maybe you got feedback from your filmmaker community or from the lab folks, but just to be very honest and upfront in your application.
That's great.
Yeah, that's something that I've always told people who are applying for anything. And I think someone made a comment about a cover letter earlier, which was, we want to, as assessors of your applications, we want to see all those things that Apoorv has described. How are you applying yourself to your career? What is your narrative, not in terms of the film narrative, but your own personal narrative in terms of like, how are you developing and growing, and what is your chart? I want to see sort of a signifier of dedication, I guess, to the craft and where you want to go. And I guess that's kind of really what appeals to me when I'm assessing an application. So yeah, I think, yeah. So I was just checking, I think Alana, you wrote a response to that earlier. This is one question. It's not particularly about the lab per se, but it's like, how does a director go about finding a compatible, skilled, and responsible producer? And I hear this question so many times from directors looking for someone. It's kind of hard.
It is hard. I would say things like Project Involve are helpful. I would also say maybe look through who past years producers have been at programs like Project Involve, and maybe ask for introductions. I would keep like, if you were doing cold outreach and like generally trying to meet people to be producers, I would send maybe a log line, your bio, so that people know, have a little bit of context to both your project and to who you are. And then I would also start asking friends and the immediate network around you, kind of make it known that you're looking for a producing partner, that you have a project coming up and you're looking to meet people, and then meet as many people as you can until you find like that creative synergy and feel like, oh, this person understands my vision and has the same goal of wanting to make the same film or the same type of film as I do. And you also kind of want them to be at a similar career stage. Like if you're making shorts, you want somebody maybe who's done 1 or 2 shorts and is still excited about making shorts. If you're going into your first feature, maybe you want a producer who either has their first feature or has done enough shorts that they feel ready to have their first feature.
Yeah, I mean, and from personal experience, like Alana, Ashley, and I are all filmmakers, and for my last project, it took me a year and a half to find one good producer who, I mean, there were plenty of people interested, but one person who was the right person and was prepared to commit. So yeah, it takes time. So be patient and resourceful. So when you were doing the producing lab, did you have any financing attached to Joyland?
We had no financing attached to Joyland. I think actually we thought we were going to pursue the European co-production route. So I think maybe we had like a letter of intent from a German broadcaster. That did not pan out. And so after the lab, a couple months after the lab, our whole financing structure changed, but we did not have any financing. We did not have a recognizable cast attached or executive producers attached or anything.
So then that leads us into Fast Track, which is pretty much Film Independent's finance market. So at what point did you apply for that, and what did you get out of Fast Track?
So I think the producing lab was sometime around October, and Fast Track was around November. I would say we got 2 things from Fast Track. One is we were really able to refine our pitch and talk about our film in a really concise way. So we had, these meetings are 15 to 20 minutes. And so Simon would do a 5 to 7 minute creative pitch. And then I would come in and talk about, this is our budget. This is when we want to shoot. This is what we have. This is what we need. And we would really be upfront and say, we're looking for financing. This is what our budget is. And this is when we want to shoot. And this is why we want to shoot on this timeline. Because for us, weather was a consideration. And if we didn't shoot in the summer months, we would have had to wait a whole year to be able to capture the element of the sun. Mm-hmm. So We had, I would say, so I was in LA and this was Zoom. Fast Track because it was COVID. And I guess it's staying on Zoom, which is nice because everyone can.
We're talking about how we're going to do it this year. Maybe a hybrid model, but there will be some Zooming.
Got it. So Saim was in Pakistan. So there was a 12-hour time difference. So he would do it from whatever, 9 p.m. to 9 a.m. or whatever it was for him. 60 meetings or maybe over 60 meetings in 3 days. And it was a variety of meetings. So we met with independent financiers. We met with production companies. We met with agents. We met with managers. We met with publicists because it is a variety of people, all of whom, and we met maybe with like a couple of folks that were like distribution advocates, but a variety of people, but all of whom are in the ecosystem of making films and maybe other producers as well. So I would say, again, two concrete things. Most of the people who got Joyland passed, and that I think is to be highly expected in any case, in any scenario. There will always be way more passes in the real world too than you will get yeses. And the other thing that we did, so we did Fast Track immediately after the producing lab, but we hadn't incorporated the notes that we got yet. So we did the meetings and we sent our thank you emails, but we did not send our package out until January 2021, when we felt ready, when we felt that the script was now ready to be shared with financiers. So we kept in touch with everybody and we said, we're gonna have a new draft in January and we'd love to share it with you as soon as we're ready. And so, yeah, that's when we started getting either passes or yeses. We got one yes from a producer who has a financing partner, and they looked at our finance plan. So we sent them the script, and then we sent them our finance plan and our budget. They looked at our finance plan and they said, okay, we will put in a third of what you need. So financiers typically want to co-finance. They don't necessarily want to take on all of the risk of putting in, fully financing any project, but especially a first-time feature director and feature producer's project. But that kind of collaboration and she really opened the door to then meeting somebody who she enjoyed financing with. And she was like, I have another person who I really enjoyed working with. May I share it with them? And we were like, of course. And then, so then there was a trickle effect of financiers who all knew each other, who wanted to finance something together, who then made commitments to the film. The other concrete thing that came out of it, so we had exposed the film to the WME Indie Film Finance Group in the past, and they were tracking it. But what ended up happening was they met us again at Fast Track. And so by that time, they'd maybe kind of seen us like 2 or 3 times. And the financier who said yes to us, she was repped. They were repped at WME. And so when one of their financiers said we were going to make a commitment, then it was like kind of a no-brainer for the finance team to come on board. I will say, finance teams, they were great in helping us kind of figure out the term sheet and kind of manage those relationships a little bit, but it's not like they were the magic answer. And yes, they do have a roster of financiers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, that they hooked us up to all of the people in the world and magically our movie got made. It was just a step-by-step process.
But it is fair to say that Fast Track really helped.
Absolutely.
Right. Good.
I think probably before Fast Track, and especially for indie filmmakers who when you're a first-time feature filmmaker, very often you don't have access to agencies, you don't have access to managers, and that is actually a completely normal situation to be in when you feel like you don't have access. And what Fast Track did was put us in conversation with a lot of those production companies and agents and financiers, and it really opened the doors.
Someone's asked in the questions, did the budget change quite a bit from where it was prior to going through both programs?
The budget, I would say, I think we were thinking it was going to be about $1 million for production and post, and I think it ended up being closer to like 750, 800. But what very often ends up happening for first features, also features in general, is that if you have the ability to raise just what you need for production and to get a film in the can, then you can kind of wait to raise your post money, because things will change once people start seeing the dailies and all of that. So we went into production with just what we needed for the physical production of the film and not our post money, which is around $500,000.
Right. And you were shooting in Pakistan. Did that mean things went further, or did it just
Much further?
Oh, good.
Much further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so was all the funds then from the US, or was it Europe as well?
No, it was fully financed by American equity, and we had some in-kind donations from Pakistan, but I would say all American money.
Which kind of leads us then on to fiscal sponsorship. So even though the film was financed through equity, then you became part of our fiscal sponsorship program. So what was the need then for fiscal sponsorship with this film?
So for two reasons. One was we had a financier who wanted to come in, and she wanted to give us her contribution as a grant. She said, I will make this a grant. And which is wonderful, because then it doesn't go into the recoupment model. I don't have to pay her back for this very generous contribution that she's making just in return for a credit. And it raises it lowers the risk profile of the entire film. And it raises the value, because I'm getting that money, but I don't have to pay it back. So that was the immediate need for why we applied for fiscal sponsorship. And then the second reason was we went into our Oscars campaign and we didn't have a distributor, and we had to raise money again, which is a really, it's both like a wonderful place to be in, because you're like, oh, we have an Oscars campaign to run. It's also a really horrible feeling to like be a producer and be like, I'm still raising money for a movie that has been finished and that we showed at festivals. And will this be recorded? Is it for public recording?
This is going to be recorded, so it may be on YouTube. So
okay, got it.
So, yeah,
that's fine. Everything I have said so far.
Everything's great. Okay.
Everything's good. So we did have to raise money again, and we did have investors come in, but we also wanted to keep finding resources, but keeping the risk profile of the cost, the value of the film lower. And so we did have like a grassroots campaign where we were reaching out to people and asking them to put in money through fiscal sponsorship for our marketing campaign.
Fantastic. So how much money if you're allowed to say, how much money did you raise through fiscal sponsorship?
Through fiscal sponsorship, I want to say somewhere between 200 to like 250,000 US dollars.
And obviously the tax deduction that people got from that was a major incentive for people.
Yeah.
That
was probably the only incentive, along with credits. We did not provide, we didn't do, what you see in like a crowdfunding campaign where you're like, you get this and you get that and you get a t-shirt, and we didn't do any of that.
Yeah. But I imagine it was easier because people could watch the film, and so they could say, oh yeah, this is something I want to get behind, hopefully. Yeah. Sorry, I've been doing all the talking. Alana, Ashley, do you have any questions for Apurva?
Yeah, I have so we've been getting some questions here about artist statement and cover letter. I wonder if you have any tips or advice for some of the folks on how to approach that.
So I'll just go backwards. How much did you need to raise for an Oscar campaign and for a festival campaign? So a festival campaign, we did budget for in our film festival budget, in our production budget. We budgeted for 2 festivals to fly 5 members out. So, we were literally just looking at flights being okay, to fly from Pakistan to, let's say, to Toronto or to Cannes, maybe it's $2,000 per person, and then to put them up in an Airbnb, maybe $5,000 to right? It's really like flights and your Airbnb, and then you want to have a publicist. And I would say like a good film festival premiere, a publicist costs anywhere between $5,000 to $7,000. So those were kind of the numbers that we were looking at, and we said we would pay for our cast and the director and myself for 2 film festivals. And then after that, people started kind of self-financing. If they wanted to come and have the exposure, they were welcome to, but the production could no longer bear those costs. And then for an Oscar campaign, there's a couple of different stages to an Oscar campaign. So do you make it to the short list? Do you make it to the nominations and the nomination to the win? I would say conservatively for feature film, and this is different depending on different categories, but we were in the best international film category, so I would say like 100 to 150K to make it to the first stage till the short list, and then you do that again to the nomination, and then after that, it's like you could spend millions of dollars on this. And this was like we were like the baby, like no resources, like asking friends and family. So that's the kind of the starting point. Is it better to apply with the more commercial features?
I think this is more this is more for the lab running people kind of thing.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, just like the first question, which was from Dan, which was if you had any advice about what makes an artist statement compelling. So what have you kind of done in the past that's clearly worked for you?
I would say make it very personal and very honest. I think you want to be able to connect with the folks who are reading your application, and being vulnerable, sharing your story, talking about why this story is important for you to tell. I think the intellectual artistic side, everyone's like, most people are wonderful artists. Most people have been, have good taste in film and can speak to that. But I think to speak about why it is very important for you to make this film, and kind of why it's like your life's work and your passion, I think is very important.
Yep, I second all of that.
I have a question. After going through, I know you're still on the journey with Joyland at the moment, but the stages of your production in which we've been just discussing. I was curious what you learned through going through what you went through with Joyland, and I'm sure moving into another project in the future. Any advice you would give to filmmakers, or any things that you will be thinking about as you step into your next projects?
Any advice to filmmakers? I would say definitely read all of your contracts. Have a lawyer read all of your contracts. Make sure all of that stuff is like buttoned up and suited up. And then I would also say, I think just have a lot of creative conversations with your collaborators. So that it's like making sure you guys are on the same page about the kind of movie that you're making. I'd say broadly, I would say that's it. But if there's anything specific, I'll try and think of more, but yeah.
And you did end up making the shortlist for the Oscars. And the film does have a distributor now. You did just premiere in New York. Yeah. And you did sell out every screening, I believe. I'm just confirming these things.
Yeah, for the weekend, there were 9 screenings over the weekend. Yeah, that we sold out.
And it was like the biggest opening for an independent film in how long? Something like that. I'm just sort of trying to.
It was the biggest opening for Film Forum for a foreign language film in the last 10 years, which is exciting.
That's pretty cool.
Wow.
Okay. So having done pretty much the whole suite of film independent courses, do you have any advice for anyone who's hoping to enter our ecosystem, like where to start, what kind of state they might be in, or what even kind of projects that because obviously you've interacted with a lot of other filmmakers who've also been through our programs as well. Yeah. So do you have any sort of general thoughts in that kind of direction?
I think my general thoughts would be to kind of focus on the community building aspect. That is how you find other directors to work with, other writers to collaborate with. Is I think sometimes people forget and kind of like the filmmaking race of it all, or kind of like the hustle of it all, that you make films with people that you enjoy spending time with and that you enjoy having creative conversations with. And it really can feel like a marriage, and a very long marriage, when you're making a film with somebody. And so like the very basic elements of like, do I creatively vibe with this person? Can I spend a significant amount of time speaking to them about stories, and about the kinds of films that we want to make? And can we just enjoy our company? And because filmmaking also still has to be fun to be sustainable. Like if it's constantly stressful, it's unlikely that it will be. I mean, it is stressful, but you know, I think you have to still find the fun in it. And so I think to really come at finding your collaborators with like a community building approach, I think is really helpful. And then in terms of the stories, I think the market is constantly changing. What the audience wants constantly changes. A couple of years ago, like even a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once, people would have been like, wow, most of this film is not in English. I don't know if people could have perceived what an action comedy tone in multiple universes would have been like if you conceptually explained that. I don't think people might know what it is. But I think as long as you root something in like real human emotions, and you as a creative, whether you're a producer or a director, really know why you're telling a certain story, and you can explain why other people, other audience members will connect to it in like really basic human emotional terms. I think those are the stories that stand out, and that can also stand like the test of time and will translate beyond language, or beyond like geographic region.
Fantastic. Yeah, so we've got a few more questions coming in. Joan wants to know if you can come to Los Angeles City College. Is that specifically for Apoorva, or is that for all of us? Do you have a rep for PR engagement?
I don't have a rep for PR. But I'm sure if Joan reaches out to you, Daniel, you'll pass along my email address, and I will be happy to.
All right. Okay. Yeah, so a couple more questions. I may have missed this, but are any of the programs on Zoom or hybrid? Right now, we're still on Zoom, hopefully transitioning into a hybrid model before eventually going back to real people in real places at real times. But we'll get there eventually. Yeah, does anyone have any more questions for Apoorva before we release her back into the wild of deep space?
I'll ask one last question. How do you find your creative collaborators?
How do I find my creative collaborators? A couple of different ways. I was lucky that I did go to film school, and many of my collaborators come from there, and it makes it a little bit easier because we're all trained to speak in the same creative language. Again, through programs like Project Involve, you meet a lot of collaborators. And then it becomes like, once you become part of the filmmaking community, like even if you and a friend aren't collaborating together, but you're talking about the kinds of stuff that you want to do, they'll be like, oh, I have these people that I think it would be really great for you to meet. I think it'd be really great for you to meet these directors. I think you'd get along. And then of late, as you evolve in your career, now it is becoming a little bit more of the traditional model where agents and managers will set me up with their clients and will send over their directing samples or writing samples for you to review, and then to take a meeting with them. So in a lot of different ways, through your personal network, through your professional network, through your school network, sometimes for family, like everybody wants to meet people.
Right. I feel one of the biggest takeaways of the producing lab is the cohort. Are you still in touch with your cohort?
Absolutely. I think Maria Altamirano and I were both at Sundance, like with her with her lab film, and with my lab film. So yeah, we're very much in touch with our lab cohort.
One final question then, I guess, how did Mahala, sorry, I think that's
Malala.
Malala, sorry, get involved?
Malala got involved after we premiered the film at Cannes. She saw the film, she really enjoyed it, and she wanted to be able to lend her voice to support the film and elevate it and increase its visibility, especially as we went into the awards campaign.
Fantastic. Okay, well, if that's the end of the questions, we've got a couple more lab specific questions to answer, which we'll get to, but we thank you very much for coming in and being so informative and open with us, Apurva. It's great to see you again.
Yes, likewise, Daniel. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
And also, when's Joyland hitting LA?
On April 21st at the Landmark New Art. Please get your tickets.
And it is an amazing film. It's one of the best film I saw last year, and I'm not saying that just because you're here. So yeah, it's truly fantastic. So yeah, so Landmark on April 21st. Did you say?
21st.
April 21st. All right. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye. All right. Well, thanks for that. So we've got a few more questions to get through. So one that says, I understand that you need completed features producers lab. No, we do not need completed features. We need completed scripts. Is that correct, Ashley?
Yes, completed feature scripts.
Yes, you don't need to have made a feature first. You can come in, as Apurva said, she'd never made a feature film before. And so I don't think any of the people from the lab usually have a full feature they've completed when they go into the lab.
So we accept projects that are in post-production. So either a script that is in development or a project that is in post-production.
Okay, and is it better to apply with a more commercial feature script or something more artistic / diverse / foreign language if both are being developed in tandem?
That's an interesting question.
Which film do you want to make more? I mean,
yeah, there you go.
Make the one that's most personal to you. I will submit the one that's the most personal to you, because I think that's what we will see. If it's just commercial, yeah, it's likely to just read as commercial to us. We want to see what is speaking to you on a really deep level. And like Apurva said, something that's incredibly personal to you, and why are you the person to tell the story? If you can articulate that, then we're probably going to take notice.
Yeah. And what's commercial also shifts. It's kind of a moving target. So I think it's perhaps not helpful to focus on what is commercial or what is commercial currently, because by the time you're applying for the grant or applying for the program and your film is made, it might have changed. So I think it's a long haul to make a feature film. So yeah, as everyone's been saying, apply with the project that you most want to make, and we'll feel that that will come out in your application, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah. Do you help people find casting directors? If you're part of Fast Track, there's usually a casting director as part of Fast Track. Is that right, Ashley?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. So in that regard, yeah, you will have access to a casting director who could potentially help you. And I think usually within the lab, does the producing lab talk about casting at all?
No. I mean, it might come up in conversation, but it's not a specific session.
Right. So the labs are not available for short films. They're just features. Project Involve, which I said will be spoken about on the next session like this in June, is our short film program. So tune in for that one and find out a little bit more about the shorts that are made in Project Involve.
And but fiscal sponsorship is for everyone.
Yes. I have 3 completed scripts. Can I apply for more than one? I recommend not. I recommend, as we've said, apply for the one is most personally, because if you're kind of spread out over all of them, we'll kind of probably get the impression that you're not focused, to be blunt. So yeah, apply to the one that really speaks to you. What about, like, genre isn't a problem. We'll accept everything in any genre. But what about budget, Ashley?
Any budget. Well, really? I mean, independent. Independent.
Usually we classify independent as being like under $20 million, I think. But also you need to back that up with a decent finance plan, I think. Is that correct?
Something that's realistic based on the script.
Yeah.
So
The
if
key
it
word
is some outrageous budget, there has to be a financial plan that follows that.
Yeah. So realistic is the key word there.
Yes.
And yes, you can do fast track with a documentary. We accept 5 documentary projects for fast track. And you meet with at least 20 people.
And also for fast track, for documentary, you need to be somewhere in post-production. You can still be shooting, but basically you need to be a little further along than just a treatment or mission statement for your doc. You need to have been shooting, and because that's going to be what's most helpful to you as well for the opportunities in fast track and meeting with the executives and financiers and folks that for documentary, it's a little different than fiction in that way, that you need to kind of be able to really show what your documentary is going to be.
In the producing lab, do we help them develop the financing plan?
We offer advice, support, and sessions, but there's no one specific workshop for financing. But we do have a session.
Okay. And is Film Independent interested in much smaller micro budget projects with budgets between $50,000 and $300,000? Definitely for fiscal sponsorship. That's a good range to look at in terms of fundraising, because those are very achievable goals. I say very achievable, but compared to millions, it's a lot more achievable. What about for producing lab?
I'm not sure 50,000, 300,000 we've seen projects come through.
Yeah, the main thing is everyone needs to get paid. I think that's kind of what we're looking at. You need to, $50,000, it's difficult to imagine a feature being made at that level and it being competitive in the market and has paid everyone even scale. So as long as everyone's getting some kind of payment and it is a professional model, then I think it would be considered. So yeah, definitely looking more at the 300,000.
What would you say, Daniel, for the range of budgets for the documentary projects and fast track?
Again, I would say we're looking at the same kind of thing. So like, is everyone being adequately compensated, and have you allocated enough funds to produce a work that is going to be competitive in the marketplace? And I'm not necessarily talking about a film that's going to go out and earn a lot of money, but it has to stand up against other films that are being released. So otherwise you're just shooting yourself in the foot, releasing a subpar project. So again, that's something we look at, was just are you approaching this in a realistic way? And are you aware of like where you want the film to go, and have you budgeted enough to get it to the standard to go to those places?
Mm-hmm. And a great resource for documentary in particular is the Documentary Producers Alliance. If any of you have heard of that before, they have a website that has suggestions for these kinds of things, and also just kind of checking around to Know Film School and other resources to kind of get a sense if that's a new concept of what kind of standard wages might be reasonable wages, because that's certainly something we're looking for in our applications. That it's kind of that dance between something where you feel like you're getting paid, people are getting paid, that you're being reasonable, that it's not all, people donating their time, but also not so expensive that we don't feel like it's possible for you to be able to reach that goal. But I know it's vague. It's a hard question to answer, because I think it really depends on the project and the team.
Yeah. So how would we approach Dan's question then? where there are myriad ways to skin the cat. I think that means so.
Sorry, I can speak to. I can speak to what we look at in the application. At least there's a difference between finance plan for the producing lab and fast track. For the producing lab, at least, what is the strategy or the tactics behind an idea of where you're heading with the finance plan? I don't yet to have at least a direction, and with fast track a little further along, ironed out finance plan.
Yeah, I think it's more like it needs to be a roadmap, and again, a realistic roadmap of where you want to go with, or where you think you'll be able to approach for financing. There's no really set format as such that we look for, really, is there, Ashley?
No.
It's more just like, that you have a realistic idea of how much the film's going to cost and what are the potential areas or what are potential financiers that may be interested in this, or how much equity investment you'll need versus, say, donations or charitable giving or anything like that. So just break it down however you can. And, there are lots of ways to look at it. So, again, it's not a one size fits all kind of model. It's like what works best for your film. And that's probably not wildly helpful, but everyone has to do their own research, and we want to see people bringing that to the table as well with their application. Marvin asks if we shot some preliminary footage for the sake of a pitch trailer and plan on replacing. No, because documentary projects need to be in post-production. So that would imply that you've shot most of the film. Even if you haven't edited most of the film, it would imply that most of the actual production is done.
And this is for fast track.
That's for fast track. Because essentially, I'll just leave it at that. Tony, if you're applying for producing lab and the film isn't shot by the lab deadline, but will be in post by the lab in the fall, can we say yes?
Yes.
You can say it will be in post. That's fine. Again, as Ashley said, the film doesn't have to be shot to apply for producing lab, but we do accept films that are in post production.
And we will need to see a cut.
Yes.
By the time,
and AR says you have a 500K budget and a 2 million. So what do we think about alternative budgets? That's pretty reasonable.
I mean, that's pretty normal, right? To have a kind of two different plans, or the kind of dream budget and also the budget you could still make the film for, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you've got to have your dream budget, I think, and then you've got to have your budget of how much it is actually going to cost. And I think Apurva kind of talked about that a little bit in terms of like saying they had to shoot the film, and so they raised the money for that, and then they needed an additional 500,000 for post. So I'm sure they could have done it for less, but having shot it, they kind of knew exactly how much they needed. We cannot help with attaching big name actors on board, but that would be working with a casting agent. That falls outside of our range of things that we can do. We can't get your script to talent. And can someone go in and make a change to their Producers Lab application once it's submitted?
Yes, you should see a button in Submittable that will send us an email, and we can open your application for editing.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. It's been a really great audience, very attentive, lots of great questions. Oh, wait.
Here's another one.
If you're making a film about an event that filmed in 2019 and will follow up in characters in 2025, shoot half my film then? No, you are still in production. You're only halfway through. So unfortunately, that falls outside of our range. Unfortunately, sorry. Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up for tonight. It's almost 7:00 in Los Angeles. So I really want to thank everyone for being here, and thank you again to Apurva, and thank you, Ashley, and thank you, Alana, for being so informative and wonderful. And again, if anyone has any questions, please email artistdevelopment@filmindependent.org. and that will reach our fantastic coordinator, Zach, and Zach will make sure those questions get to everywhere they need to go and you'll get responses. But yeah, please, you can reach out to us anytime about any of our programs, not just the ones we discussed tonight, and we'd love to hear from you. So our job is to make things as easy as possible for you. And so please don't be afraid to reach out if you need help. And with that, I will bid everyone good night.
Thanks everyone for tuning in and learning about our programs. But yeah, I think you'll find our team is very approachable and we'd love to hear from you and we want to support your projects. So get in touch with us and we hope to be able to work with you in the future.